Hello, we're back with module number 2, working with the dog license data. And in this module, we'll strictly talk about activity 6, which is creating the pivot table. One note that I wanted to add, so this video is in Excel, and I can also film creating pivot tables in Google Sheets, which I almost think it's easier in Google Sheets now than Excel, which wasn't the case when we first started this course. But sometimes, so if you're in a situation maybe where the kids have laptops or just have the Chromebooks and they only have access to Google Sheets, one thing we have done in the past is just to select a manageable amount of data. Like we talked about in the last video, there's over 78,000 rows. So if you're just trying to practice working through some of these activities, you can just actually on your own PC, if you're using Excel, cut the data, chunk it either. Maybe it's even just by your zip code or any way, or just taking the first so many, maybe the first part of the year, and giving them an amount of data that they're able to work with on their Chromebooks, because 78,000 rows, sometimes that's going to be too much for the Chromebooks to handle. So I just wanted to add that in since I forgot to mention that in the last video. This is just going to pick up with activity 6, and I printed it just to kind of walk through some of that information here. In the module, there is a video that the students from Pitt provided on creating pivot tables. This one will just be for the specific activity, what I'm going to walk through with you right now. So one really important step that sometimes you might forget until you've done this a few times is that each entry here is going to need its own specific number in order to analyze the pivot table. So what you want to do is go to click on column A, and then you can go up to insert, control click, whatever way that you want to get to inserting. I just did a control right click, and I'm going to insert a column to the right. And I usually just name it num for number. So each of these will need their own distinct number. So I mean, if you went through and just counted 1, 2, 3, that would take forever. So one easy thing you can do is just to create a formula. So I typed in the 1 as a placeholder, then I'm going to type in the formula equals. I'm going to click on A2 plus 1. So it's just going to keep adding a number. So this will help us easily fill in the numbers. So what I usually do next is I copy it, and I click onto the row below it. So I'm in A4 right now, and I'm going to take the little handy tool to take me all the way down to the bottom. And before you click on this last cell, you need to hit Shift. So I always go to Shift, and then I'm going to click on my last entry, and then I'm going to paste in the numbers. So now if you scroll down, this is a really important step, and sometimes the kids will forget this too. But once you do this a few times, you'll remember that you need to do that. So we're all the way at the bottom. So we see everything has an individual number. And actually, I went back to the top, but you really want to stay down at the bottom here, because to make your pivot table, you can't select the whole spreadsheet. You only want to select the cells that have data in it. So similar with that click, shift click, if we click here on our last cell, which is H78740, and then scroll back up. So we've selected our last column, our last row of data, and we want to go up, and again, hitting Shift, and then clicking on that num in A1. So now we just have the cells with data contained in them selected. So our next step is going to be to insert our pivot table. So I go up to the toolbar and hit Insert. Pivot table is your first choice here. So I'm going to click on Pivot Table, and I always put it in a new worksheet. I don't keep it in this existing one. So new worksheet, sometimes it defaults to existing the first time. Just hit New, and this will give us our pivot table. So we have a few questions in here that we want to answer, but just to show you around this first. And this is where I feel like Google Sheets is actually a little easier to manipulate with the pivot table fields over here on the right, as opposed to what Excel has right now. So we need our numbers in here. So our first thing we're going to talk about is the values. So our number is going to be our place value. So if you click on it, and you can just drag it down either way. I don't want it in here twice. Oops. Let me unclick it. I usually just drag it down to values. You'll see that it's sum, which sum here is not meaningful. We need to switch this to count. So if you click over on here, this little field box will pick up, and we want to change it to count instead of sum. And now we have count. So that has our same number, 78,739 entries. So our first question here is, what is the top dog name in Allegheny County? So to find that out, we're going to go up to our field here. And one thing I want to show you too, if your fields ever do go away on the right, if you just click back over into the pivot table, they'll come back to you. So let's find our dog name. We're going to drag that down to row. And you can see now it just sorted alphabetically how we saw on our sheet. So all the numbers are up top and then getting into the Abbeys. And then column B is the count. So for example, April, there are 10 dogs named April. May, there's 11 dogs. June, there's 12. August, there's 4, and so on. So again, it would be tricky if we're going through this and ticking down, like here's a big one, Angel, there's 191, looking for big numbers. This would still take us a fair amount of time. So there's some tricks that we can do to sort this and making it a little bit easier. Bailey, 667. So this time we're going to come over to our pivot table and click on that arrow. And we're going to sort not by dog name. So it's a sorting ascending now by dog name, but we want it count and we want it descending this time. And then you can close that. So then this is your answer right here. So it's sorted all of the dog names and come up with the count by count the highest number. So Bella, that is the most popular name, which I feel like every year we've done this. Bella has been number 1. Definitely looks like Lucy and Buddy getting a little bit closer. Bailey, Max, which I always laugh because that's one of my children's names, but it's always a popular dog name too. But this will give you your top 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So these would be your answers, and you can have the kids either write it down on a piece of paper, type it in a Google Doc, but these would be your top 10 dog names. So some other things we can do. So looking at the module, a couple of additional questions, and the kids can come up with their own too. What zip code has the most dogs? So once we're done looking at the name, you can just unclick dog name and that will go away. And then we're going to pull zip down. And again, it's sorting this in ascending. So this would make it easy to find a specific zip code if you're just looking through. But if we want to find the most popular, again, we need to go back. We're going to do count and then again descending to get the highest number. So this would tell you 15237 is the zip code with the most dogs, which is actually really, really close between 15237 and 15108, which we always go into and look these up. Are they close together? Which is another activity, looking at some of the top ones. Where are they? And what does that tell you? And that kind of goes on to some different questions too. Are they in more populated areas? Are they around parks or anything? So you can take a look at where these zip codes are too. But again, it can give you the top zip codes. So now to do some segmenting, which is another cool thing to do, and the pivot table makes it really easy. So I'm going to clear this and then start from scratch. So the third question we have, and again, the kids are feel free to have the kids look up their own questions when you get to activity 7 and activity 8. But right here, so Bethel Park, our zip code is 15102 for the most of the community. There are a couple of other zip codes on the fringes, but we're going to go with 15102. So we're back to our count. So what we want to pull into segment, we're going to pull in first our zip code back in, and then we're going to pull in the dog names too below it. So we have both right here. So a cool thing, and again, we could sort through to figure out, to find 15102, scroll down, that would take a really long time now that we have every single name by every single zip code. So a couple of things we can do here by going to click back on that down arrow. So 15102, I said, is Bethel Parks. And if you search for that, and then you can unselect, it's selected all right now, and just click on 15102. And it will give us now, we've already got it sorting by count, and it will show you the top dog names. And it's fun too for the kids to look through and to find theirs. But Bethel Park is similar to the total for Allegheny County. Bella's number 1. Lucy and Bailey were up there. Cooper was another one that's up a little bit higher. And you could just a fun way to show them how to segment the data too. Sometimes I've also done columns over here as far as segmenting. That would work if you didn't have quite so many selections. So you would have, if you maybe there was only 5 zip codes involved here, you could put the zip codes in the column and they would come across here, and then the names could be down in your rows. But with so many names and so many zip codes, this isn't really one that lends itself to segmenting using the columns. But if one of your variables has fewer selections, that's one way you can just visualize it all on one page too. So this is just a crash course here with pivot tables. Like I said, super helpful. And if a lot of the schools are going to be using Google Sheets too, I'll make one as Google Sheets. But really, if you can do an Excel, I think that's pretty easy to translate either way. And Google Sheets is pretty easy to use now on that front too. One last thing while I'm looking at the module sheet too, you can always capture some of this info if you want to make a graph, because that's going to be the next spot. Say I want to do the top 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We can even copy this if you click on the plus, and then if we go to paste, if we just want to paste the values, and then I like to tell them to name, if you go down to the bottom, top dog names in 15102. I like them to name the sheet too, just so if you have a lot of data that you know what you're working with. So similar to when we created the pivot table, if you just highlight all the cells here, insert, if we want to do a simple bar chart, or you can hit on recommendation, but this will give us our charts. Let's see what they were going to recommend for us. Here you go. Of the data too, and then you can go into this and highlight and do some formatting to add in the number of entries and all of that information too. But that's just another quick way to show them how to use your pivot table and then copy and paste it to a new sheet, so that when you go back and manipulate your pivot table again, that you still have that data somewhere else to create a graph for.